Ever since the inauguration of the no-spine Clementine on January 20th, also known as Donald Rump, multiple anti-trans bills and executive orders have made the headlines each and every week. With more than 450 anti-LGBTQ bills being put forward in the first 2 months of 2025 alone, it can be truly impossible to keep up with just how many of our rights have already been eroded. And yes, you heard that right. The first 2 months of this year alone have given way to nearly as many anti-LGBTQ bills as the entire years of 2023 and 2024. Just let that sink in and tell me I'm overreacting. And so today, we are going to take a look at the absolute 6 worst states for trans people where both the laws and populations are most hostile and dangerous, and where persecution is increasing at a flabbergasting pace. In each of these 6 states, it is completely impossible for people to change their legal gender under any circumstances, even if they have had a sex reassignment surgery. And perhaps the worst part is that all 6 states we will cover have only just recently made these disgusting moves against liberty and self-determination, with one state doing so just last week. Of course, the denial that trans people legally exist is only scratching the surface of the inhumane and backwards laws being passed in these states, like the 98 new bills targeting trans healthcare that have been put forward in the last 2 months alone, or the 27 censorship laws targeting the open discussion of LGBTQ topics and people. This unfolding disaster is why it is important to take a deeper dive into the situation on the ground and highlight the states that should be avoided at all costs, especially for trans people. For those who are not in the headspace right now to dive into such a heavy subject, consider checking out the more encouraging video I made a few weeks ago, covering the 10 objectively best states for our community in 2025, according to the data. For everyone else, let us now dive into this list of socially stunted and primitive-minded states, all of which are governed by some of the lowest scum on Earth. Knowledge alone does not win fights or rights, but it is always the first step. We begin our unfortunate journey today in the center of the country with the state of Kansas, a state that never ceases to pioneer new ways to oppress its residents and strip away their basic liberties. It's not surprising then that Kansas is also home to the extremist Westboro Baptist Church, an evangelical far-right church that has made a name for itself owing to its radical attacks on queer people for over a decade. Sadly, such primitive views are not only held by the vile Christian zealots of Westboro Baptist, but also held by the vast majority of political leaders in the state. And yes, they are praying. The separation of church and state does not exist in Kansas. See, in 2023, the Republican-controlled Kansas state legislature put forward 14 different anti-LGBTQ bills. In 2024, that number jumped to 16. And so far, in the first 2 months of 2025 alone, there have already been 5 new such bills. Now, I will note that the governor of Kansas, who is shockingly a Democrat, has tried to veto many of these unconstitutional bills, but her veto has routinely been overturned by the Republican supermajority in the state legislature. Ever since 2023, it has been completely impossible for trans people to change their legal gender in the state under any circumstances whatsoever. And, as one would also expect of such a state, Kansas denies all legal recognition of its non-binary citizens, and gender-neutral gender markers are no longer available on any official documentation. Furthermore, just 2 weeks ago on February 20th, the state banned all gender-affirming care for trans individuals under the age of 18. And we have seen from other states that when this happens, the suicide rates for trans youth skyrockets. Kansas, and all the other states with such laws, have blood on their hands. And for any brainwashed conservatives who somehow found this video, let me just make it crystal clear once again that in the US, gender-affirming care for children does not include surgeries or any other form of invasive interventions. You have been lied to, and your rage about so-called mutilation is manufactured and out of touch with reality. Your far-right masters have gotten you angry about something that is not even happening. Do your own research. Speaking of which, there is simply not enough time to cover every single anti-trans law in Kansas, so for those who want to dive deeper into all the individual pieces of legislation, I will leave a link to ACLU's incredible bill tracking website in the description below. The situation is clear. Trans people are not welcome in Kansas, are completely banned from changing their legal gender, face immense obstacles in accessing gender-affirming care, and are increasingly unsafe in this truly revolting state. Kansas is statistically one of the 6 worst states for trans people in the entire country as of March 2025, and so, if you or anyone you know is trans, I urge you to take this information seriously and as a vital warning while there is still time left to make plans. Moving south now, we eventually arrive in the next dishonorable state on today's list, Texas. It has gained a reputation worldwide for its extreme right-wing politics, its disdain for human rights, and its shameless embrace of policies that target its most disenfranchised residents. In 2023, Republican lawmakers in Texas introduced a whopping 55 anti-LGBTQ bills instead of addressing real issues that make people's lives better. But it gets worse. With Texas, it always gets worse. In the first 2 months of 2025 alone, there have already been 59 different anti-LGBTQ pieces of legislation put forward, more than in 2023 and 2024, despite the year having just begun. Texas always manages to somehow be even more nauseating than one at first can imagine. In August of last year, Texas decided that requiring trans people to undergo a sex reassignment surgery before changing their legal gender was not backwards enough, and so the state decided to completely ban all trans people from being able to legally change their gender under any and all circumstances, even if a surgery had taken place. And if this was not already disgusting and terrifying enough, Texas also has started making records of every trans person in the state who ever requested to have their gender changed so that they can be more closely monitored by various government agencies. This invasion of privacy is not just creepy, but could be the groundwork for something far more sinister. Non-binary people have also been predictably erased under Texan law, with no legal recognition, no ability to access gender-neutral markers on documentation, and no protection from discrimination. For a year and a half now, trans youth in the state have also been banned from accessing any forms of gender-affirming care, and a new bill in Texas is now seeking to ban gender-affirming care for adults as well, and force those who have already transitioned to detransition. See, this needs to be a wake-up call for the 94,000 openly trans Texan adults to please get out while you still can, or prepare to fight for your life. And to think that all of this does not even cover the multitude of other anti-trans laws in the state, ranging from access to bathrooms, sports, protections from discrimination, censorship, and beyond. So, if you or someone you know is stuck in Texas, please use the links in the description to see a full breakdown of how trans people have effectively been stripped of all their rights and now are being tracked in a statewide register. Moving northeast now, we find a state that once upon a time was actually considered to be a regional leader in queer rights and social policy more broadly, but in recent years has become one of the most disappointing states in the entire union. Of course, we are talking about the dumpster fire known as Iowa, a state that just last week stripped trans people of their civil rights and anti-discrimination protections, something so low that few saw it coming. It is increasingly clear that we have not been overreacting, we have been underreacting. There are truly no lows of depravity that MAGA Republicans won't happily stoop to. In 2023, this Midwestern state of only 3.2 million managed to introduce 29 separate pieces of anti-LGBTQ legislation. In 2024, that number jumped to 37, which, honestly, where do they even get the time to think of all of these unique and creative ways to take our rights away? 2025 has already seen 13 new bills targeting our community in the state, bringing the state in alignment with the very worst in the country now, for trans people in particular. Just a week ago, on February 28th, Iowa decided to double down on its quest for peak putridity by becoming the 6th state in the country to completely ban trans people from ever being able to change their legal gender under any circumstance. Just a few years ago, Iowa doing such a thing would have seemed impossible to many, but here we are. Non-binary individuals have also no legal recognition or anti-discrimination protections, and starting on July 1st, all trans Iowans will lose their civil rights protections, essentially legalizing employment, housing, medical, and all other forms of gender-based discrimination. This reverses 18 years of legal protections and shows that none of our rights in this country are safe. Since 2023, all gender-affirming care for minors has been completely banned in Iowa, and doctors are subjected to prosecution even if they simply offer gender-affirming therapy sessions with parents' consent. As with every state on this list, I encourage everyone with connections to Iowa to use the links in the description for further reading into additional attacks on our community, as there have been nearly 100 in the past 5 years alone in Iowa, ranging from school censorship laws, bathroom bans, sports bans, denial of healthcare services, and beyond. As I say for each of these 6 states today, get out of Iowa while you still can, or prepare to fight for your life, because every week things are changing and deteriorating further. We now move southeast until we eventually reach the real swamp in need of draining. Enter the truly dystopian state of Florida, a state that is built on immigrant labor and exploitation while being violently anti-immigrant, a state building mansions and skyscrapers on beaches that sink more each year, all while denying climate change exists, and a state that has decided that there is no greater threat on Earth than the simple existence of trans people. In 2023, Florida's leaders put forward 10 different anti-LGBTQ bills, then 14 more in 2024, and so far in 2025, there have already been 3 additional bills looking to further strip away our basic rights, including one looking to ban pride flags across all government buildings and other public spaces. Since last year, it has been completely impossible for trans people to change their legal gender on any official documentation, and as would be assumed, this also applies to non-binary people. And if all of this was not revolting enough, even accessing gender-affirming care is now essentially impossible even for adults in Florida, making the state a true pioneer in shitting all over civil liberties and denying its residents the ability to make choices about their own bodies. Let's just hope that next time there is a hurricane, it hits directly in central Tallahassee and drags DeSantis and his Republican enablers to their final resting place deep in the Gulf of Mexico. And if you or anyone you know still calls Florida home, consider this your wake-up call to get out before it's too late. People always think they have all the time in the world until one day the time runs out. It's always overreacting until the day that it's not. We now move back west, where we eventually arrive in a state that literally admits that it is a hoe with its very name. Idaho has always been quite underbaked in the head and full of religious fanatics who demand everyone else around them also follows their fairy tales. But somehow, the last year has taken things in the state to a new low. 2023 saw 8 different anti-LGBTQ bills introduced in Idaho, followed by another 14 in 2024, and now 14 new unconstitutional pieces of shit in the first 2 months of 2025 alone. Since July 1st, 2024, it has also been completely impossible for trans and non-binary people to change their legal gender, breaking 6 years of precedent and highlighting just how the MAGA movement has made Republican states allergic to liberty and self-determination. All gender-affirming care, even for adults, is also banned within the state of Idaho, meaning that trans people are forced to go out of the state for their healthcare needs. To add insult to injury, all nonprofits operating within Idaho are also banned from helping trans Idahoans get the care they need. The state also has no anti-discrimination laws, and in many cases encourages the harassment and denial of services for trans people. Many will also be familiar with the fact that earlier this year, Idaho became the first state in the country to launch a formal challenge to marriage equality and is seeking to have the Supreme Court overturn its 2015 ruling. Other states like North Dakota, South Dakota, and Montana have since followed Idaho's lead in trying to infringe on queer people's fundamental right to marry, all in the name of wanting to force everyone in the country to believe in their radical religious fantasies. If Idaho has its way, it'll be the poorer, shittier Christian version of Saudi Arabia. So, to anyone whom this may concern, make escaping your top priority in life, while it is still even a remotely possible option. Yes, moving is extremely hard for so many reasons. Money, family, pets, friends, and so on. But trust me, nothing else in life should take greater precedent than your survival. But now, before we finish with the last state on this horrifying list, I want to ask you personally to become a citizen of the queer kingdom. Your help fighting for our future and building a strong, informed community is vital in our quest of making the world a safer place for our people. You can officially join the kingdom here on YouTube for $1 a month, which will help me eventually make this channel my full-time focus as soon as possible. The more time I can spend on content creation, the better I can serve the community. You will also get access to some cute custom queer emojis and epic crown icons next to your comments on this channel that change and evolve the longer you are a member. Additionally, monthly live streams are also public, but they are eventually moved to members-only feeds afterwards. Controversial videos covering heavy subjects that are not quite YouTube-friendly are also privately posted for citizens of the kingdom so that we can all stay informed. And finally, joining the Queer Kingdom here on YouTube gives you the ability to chat with me and fellow members through access to our Queer Kingdom members Discord. I look forward to meeting you and working with you to create a safe and prosperous world for our people, one step at a time. And now we come to the final shithole, a state that is known for country music and hot chicken, but should be known for being stuck in the 1750s, with a violent obsession with trans bodies, drag queens, and reintroducing strict gender roles in public. 26 different anti-LGBTQ bills were introduced by Tennessee in 2023, and in 2024, that number jumped to an absolutely insane 40, more than most entire countries will have in a decade. 2025 has already seen 17 such bills put forward in the state, attacking LGBTQ people in every area of life imaginable, from housing to employment to education to free speech. Since July 1st, 2023, trans people in Tennessee have been fully banned from changing their legal gender, regardless of the circumstances, and this obviously applies to non-binary people as well. Furthermore, since July 2024, Tennessee has scrapped all anti-discrimination legislation, meaning that same-sex couples can be denied their marriage certificates, queer people more generally can be denied service at places of business, and LGBTQ people can legally be kicked out of their housing if the landlord finds out they are queer and claims that renting to them goes against their religion. If you or someone you know is currently stuck in this incredibly theocratic cesspit, I do urge you to use the links in the description to look deeper into the many other anti-LGBTQ laws in the state that we simply do not have time to go over. I am so proud of the queer people in Tennessee that decide to stay and fight, but please be aware and realize those who do remain at their own risk. And because of my personality and life experiences, I will always urge everyone to put their safety first and find a place to live where they are already welcome and free. Lastly, before we end, I want to point out that while these 6 states are definitely the most barbaric and dangerous for trans people in the country, they are not the only states that should be avoided and boycotted whenever possible. Based off of the data, I have split up the states into 4 categories. The black is for the 6 states we have already covered today, which also happen to be the only states where it is completely impossible for trans people to change their legal gender. The red color is for states that are deeply oppressive to our community, but still not quite as archaic as the worst 6, and still allow trans people to change their legal gender and access gender-affirming care, despite there being often large barriers in place. The yellow color is for states that, while far from perfect, are generally considered to be less hostile towards trans people, and where most politicians and people still value the Constitution, civil rights, and self-determination. While not perfect, they are certainly tolerable. And finally, the green color is for states that are genuinely good places to be trans, and even on par with some of the most progressive and accepting countries on Earth. These green states are the ones where you can truly feel safe and fully trust that the majority of leadership and general populations are firmly on the side of LGBTQ rights and preserving the American way of life from the attacks of the Trump regime. And now, for today's queer news story, we have a predictable but still tragic example of a conservative MAGA supporter behaving just like a typical conservative MAGA supporter. Stephen Regini from Portage Lake, Maine, assaulted the 18-year-old mother of his newborn child, killed a police dog named Preacher, and then held his newborn baby hostage during a shootout with police. Now, Stephen frequently posted anti-trans lies on X and would claim that all LGBTQ people were a danger to children. Then he went and used his own baby as a human shield, hoping that doing so would make the police less likely to administer justice for his domestic abuse and murder of Preacher the police dog. He claimed the police were coming for him due to his anti-LGBTQ and anti-abortion stances, ignoring the extreme crimes he had recently committed. Crazy, but predictable that someone who claims to be pro-life is happy to use their own newborn baby as a shield in a shootout. Sounds a lot like Trump, right? Crying about being held accountable for their actions and claiming the administering of justice is politically motivated. Once again, we see another conservative MAGA supporter projecting their own abusive nature against women and children onto our community, when it is actually they who are the only real threat to safety and to our world's most vulnerable people. And now, for those who made it to the end of this video, thank you for watching and spending time today with me as we seek to spread the word about important topics in the community. For those interested, you are more than welcome to stay around and join our increasingly powerful kingdom here on YouTube as we fight together for our future. Until next time, QK out.